Hi, guys. Welcome back. Before we get into meeting our team, above all else, your relationship to God and your relationship to yourself is most important. Of course, these two things, your own soul and God, are part of your team, but your team is there to help you. And if you don't have a strong connection with God, it's not going to be as supportive and as effective with your team. You are building a foundation with God, and this takes time. It's not possible to do this quickly. At times, this process might feel slow and even challenging, but every delay has a purpose, every lesson has a meaning, and every test strengthens your spiritual resilience. And the issue we face as humans, well, there are a few, right? We want things to happen a lot faster. There's a lot of impatience. And we also, have that karmic cycle that we're in where things ebb and flow and maybe, aren't moving so fast because we're moving through some karma that's slowing us down a little bit. But one of the biggest issues, I would say, that we face as humans is that we've been cut off from God, from our source, and we don't even realize it. And I'm saying we as a collective because so many people would not be able to tell the difference between the one true God from the false gods. So many people thinking they're connecting with the one true God, but they're not, and they can't even see it. And there is only one true God, but many who use the name, right? This is a verse in the Bible, which is important to note because a lot of people take the Bible way too literally as full truth and miss really important cues. But at the same time, then the Bible convinces us to worship the wrong God. And this is what I mean when I say the deception just runs so deep. I don't want to get too much into it here, into, religion, but it's very important for you to go on this journey on your own to reconnect or strengthen your connection to the one true God, the real God, in the way that suits you and in the way that is right for you. Just keep everything that I'm saying in mind. And in my opinion, all of the beings who call themselves by that name not only aren't God, but aren't of God. Because if you walk with God, there is no need to use his name. That's not who you are. You're not, and there's no ego and no desire to even do that. But so many are calling themselves that name, and you have to ask why. And here's the thing. So many deities, spiritual beings, masters, ascended masters, whatever they call themselves, right, are also using the name God or calling themselves a God. And to me, those same beings that are calling themselves gods, I see a lot of distortion, a lot of self-serving energy there. So, right, it's like you start to make that connection. And I'm sharing this because as we start going through your teams of light, you might come across something like this. You might come across some deception. And here's the thing, we're all from the same source. I do believe that. I feel like I know that. But not everyone is a child of God. You have souls that are here that have descended, right? We've come down from higher dimensions where we are a lot closer to God. But you also have souls here that are ascending, that are coming from lower dimensions, that have not experienced what is experienced in those higher dimensions. You have earthbound spirits that are here that have never experienced the angelic realm in that same way. So not everyone here comes from a higher dimension where they're they remember unity consciousness in its entirety. Some are coming from the lower dimensions and they're still learning like to love people and to get along with other people. So you have a vast majority of different souls coming from different worlds. And of course, we are all things exist within God's creation. But not all things are directly fashioned by God's hands. Some aspects of existence, especially on this planet, are the result of layers of creation where beings, forces, or entities have created through their own will, and sometimes in alignment with God and sometimes outside of divine order. So, for example, maybe this is just an example, okay? I'm not saying this is full truth. Maybe God did not create war, but God created beings who created war, something like that. So think of it like this. God is the supreme source, the origin, the true creator. God created beings with the ability to create. Some creations are in harmony with divine order, while others are distortions influenced by ego, rebellion, and just misalignment with truth. And over time, these layers of creation produce realities that are even further removed from the original divine blueprint. And that's what's happening here on earth. Not everything we see is fully God. It has God's energy within it because everything comes from the same source, but it is not God's direct creation. And there's a huge difference there. And both things are true at once, right? It's like I can hear people saying that this is incorrect. Everything is God's direct creation, but I don't know, you decide for yourself. And I'll just kind of say it one more time. We'll let it marinate. Some aspects of existence, structures, systems, even certain beings, are not pure emanation of God, but rather products of fallen, fragmented, or distorted creation. And the Catholic Church is a great example of this, and really many religions, because not only is it not a direct creation of God, but took the teachings and love, that pure teaching from God, and used it to self-serve and manipulate. The Catholic Church tells you there's only one true God, but they don't even worship that one true God. They worship the anti-God who wants so badly to be the one true God. This is what I'm saying, like the crazy deception and the lies. So another example, one of the biggest new age misconceptions that people walk around believing is that belief of I am God. And again, from one perspective, yes, that's true. But also from another perspective, more rooted in this reality, you are a fragment and a creation of God, not God. You are not all-knowing consciousness in this moment, in this reality. And we all need God's guidance. And your ego needs to know the difference between being of God versus being God. And many people are getting that confused. Maybe in much higher dimensions where there is more wholeness within your being. But again, you're still at the same time, there's still fragmentation because your soul is still exploring these lower realms. But there is a higher aspect of consciousness that is fully enmeshed in God's light, where you could say that is true. Like in that realm, you are God, but you are also a fragmented soul at the moment, experiencing many different layers of creation at once. And so, yeah, I think it's just important to make that distinction because we are divine in nature because we come from the divine source. However, to claim I am God in the ultimate sense is to merge the fragment itself with the source of all that is. And it's just not the reality. We're not there in the 3D world. It's not possible in the here and now, right? In other dimensions and realities, yes, this is true. But what is also true is our reality here in the 3D. And, okay, both exist. So a created being, even a highly advanced one, is still limited in perception compared to the omnipotent, omnipresent reality of God. And that truth does not make you any less. It doesn't mean you aren't enough or worthy or special. That's our own perception and our own wounds that create that belief, right? If you're triggered because I'm saying you're a creation of God and not God himself, there's some more exploration to do with the shadow work of, deeper insecurities of self that are getting triggered, feeling less than through this belief system that is causing you to perceive reality in that way. And this is where the ego deceives many. The Luciferian deception has for so long played on the idea that beings can elevate themselves to the status of God independent of him. And that just causes suffering. And I just want to share, I'm using he, him to describe God to make it easy. I don't believe God is gendered. I believe there is a feminine aspect, Sophia, and a masculine aspect, Christ. But just for the sake of explaining this, I'm going to use he, him. It's just an egoic concept. It's truly a fundamental deception. And that causes you to stray even farther from your path, which is exactly what the New Age realm does. So while we all originate from the same divine source, our level of connection to that source and that essence varies. And I know that that is a trigger for a lot of people as well, but it's just the truth. Not everyone has the same connection to God. And if that's something that triggers you, because it definitely used to trigger me, I think that ultimately why, in middle school, high school, there was a lot of self-hatred for me personally. And I, would look at other people who were genuinely happy and you could tell that they love themselves at least a lot more than I did. It was immediately, making it mean something bad about them to make myself feel better. And ultimately, I think what I was most jealous of was, their connection to themselves, their knowing of themselves. Again, this is middle school, high school, so how well did we know ourselves? But really their connection to the light that was greatly lacking in me, the connection to God. And that is, while we all originate from the same divine source, our level of connection to that source and our essence as direct creations of God vary significantly. Not everyone has the same connection to God, and it shows. So we'll, in later lessons, be able to identify that connection and get some percentages around that. But for now, we need God's guidance. We are not all-knowing consciousness in this reality. We are on a journey of remembrance, realignment, and reconnection to the source. And without divine guidance, and even with, we are so susceptible to distortion, illusion, and deception. And Jesus had taught this. This is, again, a quote from the Bible. I don't think this is the original wording of it, but he basically said something along the lines of, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing. So the ego seeks to assert this independence, but the Spirit understands that true wisdom comes from surrendering to God's will. So let's talk also about the children of God versus the created, because I mentioned that in the beginning and didn't really get to touch on it more. Earlier when I said not everyone is a child of God, I want to explain that further. So this is an important distinction, right? Again, the Bible makes it clear that while all people are God's creation, not all are his children. And a lot of people kind of like to pick and choose what they take as truth in the Bible, I've noticed. And again, I don't believe that the Bible is full truth. I believe it's, part of our story of creation and important documentation of our human history. But it's also been edited hundreds of times. So that alone is a clear indication not to take it as full truth. But even beyond that, there's still question marks. So I just kind of wanted to share my opinion on this. But it's right. We use it as a tool, not as full truth. But to be a child of God means to be in relationship with him, to be born of his spirit. And this means that there are those who exist as part of creation, but do not walk in divine alignment. Some beings have willingly rejected divine union with God and have chosen to serve other agendas. This includes the Antichrist, the reptilian species, the Anunnaki, and many humans as well. I have this theory that the God in the Old Testament and the God in the New Testament are not the same God. Both are not the one true God. Only one of them is. And I'm sorry to anyone listening who does not connect with Christianity and is like, this is out of my realm. I just felt this was important for this course when you're building this foundation. And, even when I first started reading the Akashic Records 8 years ago, in the prayer that I was given, the word God was in it and I couldn't say it. I was so triggered. I didn't understand. So, if it resonates, amazing. If not, just, listen to what I'm saying. You don't have to take anything I'm saying as full truth either. And like I said in the beginning of this lecture, this is a journey between you and God, and it will happen unique to you. So honor that. And the reason that I'm, on that path with the Bible is because one, my lineage, my spiritual lineage is the Magdalene. So this is my path. I also was forced into the church for the first 18 years of my life, but it makes sense, right? Why I had to, I held the cross. I sat at the right hand of the Reverend every Sunday against my will. But I was definitely involved in the church. And, looking back, I understand why, because I was always connected to Christianity. Christianity wasn't, it was what came before Christianity is what my path was. But again, we didn't know that back then. So anyway, hopefully you can, apply it to your own life and whatever group you may be a part of. But with Jesus and the Holy Family, it quite literally took a village over hundreds of years to prepare for this. And I believe he came to reconnect the human population with the real God, the one true God, because before that, we were not connected on a collective level. We were all worshiping a false God and false gods that maybe is Yahweh. And so right as he did this, right as Jesus reconnected us back and was spreading these teachings so we would all remember that truth, the Antichrist forces retaliated. And this counterforce emerged in various forms through the rise of Christianity, the destruction and force of the Roman Empire, the Anunnaki rule in Samaria, and what followed, or what continued even to this day, was war on consciousness and spiritual authority. And it is and has been playing out not only just in the physical realm, but also in the energetic and unseen dimensions. The true teachings of God, after finally being restored, were overshadowed by institutions, corporations, political agendas, the rise of church and state, who sought to make sure to continue to control the narrative. And this also led to centuries of altered text, suppression of mystical knowledge, and the distortion of Christ's original message, turning what was meant to be a direct connection to God into these artificial spiritual systems like religion. However, these seeds that Jesus planted, they are carried in the hearts of many. Many are deceived and kind of lost in the distortion with the false Jesuses, because there are false entities pretending to be Jesus that many people are worshiping and think they're connecting to, like the Jesus that tells them, "I'm your savior." That's a false entity. Jesus would not say that. I'm going on tangents here. Like, we're not going to get into that here. But ultimately, Jesus came to remind us that we do not need anything outside of ourselves. It's just our connection to God alone. So why would he then say, "But except for me," right? "But I'm your savior. You have to go through me." It doesn't make sense. He's a guide. He's a teacher. He's a representation and embodiment of who we can also become if we reconnect back to our creator. So these seeds that Jesus planted, they're carried in the hearts of many. Many are deceived, but the real ones we know. And there has been such a beautiful dedication to continue to preserve these original teachings, even as they were forced underground, even as they were became distorted. Those who struggle with constant psychic attack, this relentless interference, energy drains and distortions that seem to follow them no matter what they do. It's not random. It's not coincidence. It's likely because you are one of the carriers of the original code, this primordial wisdom, the uncorrupted truth that Jesus brought here, the frequency of Christ's light that was embedded into humanity before the fall of consciousness. This wisdom hidden deep within your soul and DNA and consciousness that cannot be easily accessed, manipulated, or rewritten. But they have tried. They have tried their absolute and very best. They have tried to distort that original organic code, and it has affected you, right? Likely negatively. For me, constant psychic attacks for many lifetimes. There was harm in the process, but they didn't succeed. We took a hit for sure, and a lot of us are still taking that hit, but the wisdom is kept safe. And the wisdom is a living key, a frequency signature that holds the power to dismantle the very structures of control that seek to keep humanity disconnected from its true divine inheritance. So, because of that, the inorganic forces, the parasites, the distortions that have entrenched themselves into this reality, are trying to extinguish it. They cannot allow this code to awaken, to activate, to spread, because once it does, it signals the end of their reign, the end of their dominion, and they cannot create on their own. They cannot create this original code on their own. They can only hijack, distort, manipulate, or replicate, which is ultimately still a copy. And so those who carry the original code pose a serious direct threat to their existence and their agenda. And this is why you face this relentless interference, because you are not just anyone. You are a keeper of something sacred, something unbreakable. And every attack, every challenge, every attempt to weaken you is a very desperate move to keep you from fully remembering who you are and stepping into your divine power. But the truth is, they can only win if you forget or if you allow them. They can only succeed if you surrender your sovereignty. And this is what our systems have been doing to us since they were built and implemented, and even before that, right? This is why psychic attacks intensify the moment you start to awaken. But people that are waking up immediately, they're not thinking about shadow work. So these dark forces have this upper hand. They come in and they interfere. You're starting to open up. You don't know anything yet, right? And so then you think you're talking to God or these benevolent beings, and you're mistaken. Or the moment you get close to a major breakthrough, right? You already see them for what they are and you're in it, and the attacks intensify because you're really close to breaking through something. The moment you begin clearing the distortions, healing the wounds, and reclaiming your divine connection, the resistance amplifies because you're remembering and they cannot afford that. So keep going. Remember, they are nothing. They are illusion. They are lost. They are lost. They have strayed so far from their truth. And I feel sorry for them, you know? But I do hope that they find their way for the sake of everyone, including themselves. But also know that you are not alone, and you were never alone. And there is this entire force of light, both seen and unseen, incarnate and non-incarnate, working to protect, to guide, and assist you. It's just a matter of kind of clearing some of the old stuff and the times where we didn't allow it, or we rejected it, or we strayed from our path as well, right? Because we all have at some point. So the task is to stand in your sovereignty, to reclaim your energetic field, to fortify that divine connection, and refuse to be manipulated by fear and doubt and distortion. And it's a practice, right? But just trying not to fall victim to the distortion. Don't let them win. Don't let your ego or defensiveness keep you from this path. Because once you do, once you fully own who you are, and you go through this journey and descent down below, the beings no longer have power, the attacks no longer have power, the system loses its hold, and the illusion collapses, and the original code within you activates, and it's undeniable, unstoppable, unbreakable, and feels amazing. And I am living proof of this. I went through, as I mentioned, just a lot of self-hatred and a lot of just low self-esteem, and realizing that it was never me who truly thought that way, that there was this interference, and went through unspeakable things to reclaim this, like into the underworld, over and over and over and over and over again, to reclaim me and my wisdom and my truth. But it was worth every moment. So the war between these forces, it never ended. It merely shifted forms, right? Continuing across generations into modern times. And we'll talk more about false light in later lectures, but this is what it is. So the layers of creation on this planet include divine, neutral, and even corrupted manifestations. When you recognize that you need God rather than believing you are God in your limited state, is an act of spiritual maturity. To be a child of God is to choose alignment with his will, to receive and to recognize that our highest destiny is not to claim sovereignty apart from God, right? Where I'm the creator of my reality. A lot of that new age belief work is there's just a disconnect. There's a disconnect from reality there. And it's not about manifesting, the best life for you by being so disconnected from reality, right? You see a lot of these new age people, especially within the coaching business, where all they care about is creating a life that suits them, as much money, the travel, all these things, but they're not, and they refuse to look at the horrors of the world and the truth of what's really happening now, where they're creating this separation, and it's only going to take them so far. So it's not about claiming sovereignty apart from God. I don't even think they realize that's what they're doing. That's the thing. But yeah, it's about living in communion with him. So how do we do this? How do we reconnect? And really, it's starting to clear out the distortion and starting to learn to build your own relationship. And we have to recognize that much of what we've been taught, consciously or unconsciously, has been filtered through layers of misinformation, distortion, and spiritual manipulation. Again, through religion, through government, societal programming. It's a lot of it is illusion. And we've been living in a world that for thousands of years has been filled with false light, counterfeit spirituality, and deceptive practices that keep us from fully aligning with the true God. We've been programmed with falsities through many lifetimes, and we've been working through that, right? We've been working through that through these lifetimes. But what makes this lifetime so special is that we are now a lot more aware and have the tools at our disposal, because not only are we stronger as a collective consciousness, but also within ourselves. But we needed to do this together, right? In more of the masses, we need more people to wake up, more light to anchor into this planet so we can see what's really been stuck hidden beneath the surface. So we've been working on through our wounds of separation from God in this lifetime, and we will make leaps and bounds. But in order to do that, we have to go back into these past lifetimes and times where we weren't in our hearts, and release what is not ours, and also look at the really hard stuff, the really ugly stuff, because it does exist and it is there. And if you haven't done that, if you haven't looked at that, then there are still these energetic agreements and contracts and programs running in the background that you may not even be aware of. And I'm just using religion as an example, but this goes for everything, right? Because, for example, you consciously reject religious control in this life, doesn't mean that your soul has fully broken free from the influences of past lifetimes where you were conditioned, initiated, or sworn into various spiritual or religious systems. Many of us have worshiped false gods without even realizing it, be it through idolizing power or money or earthly status, or the false light, the energies that masquerade as light but ultimately lead to separation from God. So just asking yourself honestly, have I actively cleared these bonds, oaths, and agreements with false spiritual teachings? Have I released the unconscious fears, traumas, and distortions that may still be playing a role? Have I broken free from this artificial spiritual system that maybe once dictated my beliefs and connection to the divine? Is it possible? Is it possible that your intention was always to be connected to the one true God, but that maybe you lost your way with experiencing all of the above, and maybe there is some deception there, and it's okay if the answer is yes? welcome to the club. You are still loved. You are still a child of God. We've all been deceived in one way or another. I personally feel like I've always been connected to the one true God. And you will likely agree, like you'll feel this too. The connection to the real God was always there, but it was weak. Or maybe you really are questioning this and the God you thought you knew isn't. You know, maybe you did get caught up in something, whether it was a religion or a cult or something in this lifetime or past where you were worshiping not the one true God. For me, I think I told this story on the podcast, but my first ever time hearing spirit was in church. I was 8 years old. I was in Sunday school and I was learning that, you think bad thoughts and Jesus won't be happy with you. And immediately my brain, again, I didn't know what this was, but I knew it was a bad word. So I thought a bad word, it's not a bad word. The word is sex. I thought that word in my head and immediately started spiraling of like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even control that. Like I'm a bad person. Jesus is going to hate me. Like I'm, spiraling truly as an 8-year-old child, learning these distorted teachings to just instill fear. And I hear a voice, and again, to this day, I'm like, was it Jesus, God, my higher self? I'd say now I'm feeling like it was God's voice saying, do not attach to religion. This is not the full truth. Like just separate yourself from it as a young child. So for me, I never really allowed it in, right? But again, Christianity is, for the most part, it is connected to the one true God. There's just, you know, we don't need to get into it. I feel like I'm going on all these tangents, but hopefully this is helping you and will continue to help you as you move through this course. So I mean, we're all still connected to the one true God. It's just like you're not giving it your full energy and attention. You've been giving it to something else. So, when people talk about finding God, I understand it because I've experienced it. Even though it's always been there, it's different. It's like this moment, this initiation, and it happened by going into battle with these dark forces to reclaim what is true and what is mine. And it happened after I faced the darkness and I really looked at everything. God was always with me, but I had to do this for myself. So learn to recognize the difference between the true God and spiritual deceptions that masquerade as light, which is harder than it sounds because we have so many that are working with this spiritual deception. So many other healers, musicians, teachers, especially those with a lot of power, with a big following, they're still stuck in the spiritual deception. And even if you think you know for sure, question it, confirm it, create space for the truth to come forward. I've attached a 10-minute meditation to feel the presence of the one true God with the intention to help you remember what that feels like so you can continue to become it, embrace it, and see it within yourself and the world around you. I recommend playing this before moving on to the next section. Okay, one more story and then we'll move forward, because it's so true that perception is everything. And for a long time, I perceived life through the lens of hell because of this external force, this darkness inside of me that is our system, right? Life was dull. And now I see life through the eyes of God, and it's the same world, but looks and feels so much different. And one of my best friends, he's amazing. He's been such a guide for me back to the light, through what I had to go through. And we were talking one day and he's telling me how his life has been perfect in every sense. And I'm sitting there listening to him, thinking to myself, like, we literally lived parallel lives in so many ways. We both grew up in the suburbs of a big northeastern city. We both had religious parents, his Catholic, mine Christian. We both, went away to a similar college. We wound up living in Denver together at the same time. I'm like thinking to myself, like, my life has been hell, but his is heaven. Like, this is really wild. But because it was essentially, the same overarching dynamics, but it's all perception. The difference is he saw life through the eyes of God and I didn't. He didn't carry the darkness, the wicked darkness in his soul. He is human, of course. It's not to say that, we won't experience the range of emotions, the highs and the lows, the ebbs and flows and challenges of life, but we won't be tied to and suffocated by something trying to drain our life force. And life will just be more joyful, more playful, more abundant, just more flow. And I'm seeing that now. And, that's why he was such a guide for me, just by being himself. I learned so much just by witnessing how he moves through life, an example of what's possible. And I thought if a member of my own soul family is graduating, has liberated themselves from this wickedness, then, and he's you know, a, a guide for me, then I must not be too far behind. So I hope that I can continue to also showcase my life as a living example to all of you. There is an end to the suffering. You will overcome this. Of course, we are human. We will experience the highs and lows moving forward, but it's just different. And you'll have more tools to be able to cope with life's up and downs. You will heal from this. There is an end to the darkness, and me, a member of your soul family, is graduating from allowing the evils of the world to harm me. And so you are not far behind. And we made an agreement to do this together. So I'm glad we found each other. All right, let's meet our team. See you in the next video. Bye.